Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. Happy July 3rd to you. It's a bit of a weird day in America today when we have the weekend and then that weird Monday and then the holiday. It happens every now and then, and probably a lot of people are off today. If you're off and this is the first time you've ever heard of us, maybe you're driving and you're usually at work at this hour. Catholic Answers, you can find out all about us at Catholic.com, but we're in San Diego, California, and what we do is we explain and defend the Catholic faith. And you can always reach us at Catholic.com. There's a website there if you want to get in touch with us. We've got a great Monday show for you, a very fine Monday show. A second hour, Dr. Francis Beckwith will be here, and we're going to talk a little bit about church and state. This is a big deal here in America these last few years. We're struggling over and some of the Supreme Court cases that were just handed down at the end of June are involved in this. And tomorrow being the 4th of July, we thought perfect time to talk to a philosopher whose work involves the issue of church and state. So hang around for second hour, and you can call and ask your questions or make your points. This hour, we've got a wonderful opportunity for you to get filled with the energy and the insight to go out there and share the faith. We're talking about sharing the good news this hour. Our guest is Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers, who you may know from his many appearances on EWTN, both television and radio, or from his other work. Or you may know him from his books or from his speaking wherever you are. If you've ever heard him speak, you probably still haven't gotten over it. He's the author of 5 books, including a book that every American should read. I just love this book, Father Augustus Tolton, the slave who became the first African-American priest. It should have been a movie. They should have made this a movie 20 years ago. Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers, thanks for being here with us.
Well, Cy, thank you so much for having me back. It is great to be with you and the Catholic Answers family again.
It's funny. I was driving the other day and I heard you. I was listening to this guy talking about the Catholic faith, and you come in the middle sometimes. I'm like, wow, this guy's really good. It was you. You were talking with somebody I forget who you were talking to on EWTN. I was like, oh man, he is good. We should.
Yeah, I was. I was filling in for Donovan.
For Colin Donovan. That's right. It was on Open Donovan. Line. That's right.
Yeah, he was under the weather, so they asked me to fill in, and I was happy to do it.
Well, nice job. Very nice job. Sharing the faith is your thing. This is, I think you really are one of the most sought after speakers in the whole Catholic world. People want, and it's one reason I think that. I'm going to leave a talk that you give better at loving the Lord and sharing the Lord. And that's what we want. We want to be better at loving the Lord and sharing the Lord. So give us some tips on sharing the faith.
Yeah, so the foundation is Ephesians 4:15, where St. Paul says, preach the truth in love, right? And I think the problem is that we want to preach the truth. We want people to have the same experience of Jesus in the faith that we have. And sadly, the way we think that we do it sometimes is kind of beating people over the head. If I just give them a bunch of facts, if I just show them the catechism, if I just show them this text proof, if I just show them St. Thomas Aquinas or something like that, they'll get it. And really what I found to be effective, it's about dialogue, right? It's about sharing your story and your witness and your experience, because you always want to leave the person saying, wow, I want to hear more of that. Not getting the faith across in the sense like, I just won this argument, I just won this debate. That may be fine, but is the person any closer to wanting to learn more about the Catholic faith? So in my head, I'm always thinking, how do I get this person in front of me to want to listen to more of what I have to say, even if I don't have an answer? I'm not exactly sure about that, but I will definitely find out and get back to you, and then follow up with the person. You always want to keep the doors open, even people that vehemently disagree with you. I used to be a person that just, I just wanted to just shut people down. I didn't want to have time to have people that disagreed with what I was saying, But I'm finding now that, especially in this culture today, engaging people who have a different mindset, a different way of approaching things, but at least if they're willing to listen, you can enter into a conversation. And that is the key. You start with conversation. Then It's not adversarial. There's no polemics or triumphalism. You're just exchanging ideas and entering into that person's experience. And then my job is to our job is through our baptismal call to holiness as evangelizers is to bring Christ into that conversation, to bring Christ into that experience. Because what you're doing is you're bringing light into the darkness.
888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. Deacon Harold Burke Sivers, our guest. It's more and more when we're trying to share the faith, though, I feel like we're trying to share it with people who, they're not our opponents. They just don't have any idea what religion is. Like, they don't get it, what we're doing when we're being religious. I think that I don't know what they imagine that it is, but whatever they're imagining, it's imagination. They don't have an experience of God. They don't have maybe they don't even have people in their life who talk about God. So how do you share the faith with those people?
Yeah, so the kind of one of the mantras of the culture is, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual.
Yeah.
Right? So basically when they say that, what they mean is, I am not tied down to one particular religious expression or ideology. I'm open to all different ways of thinking about faith and spirituality. So especially a lot of young people, if they don't abandon the faith for atheism, they'll take a little bit of Buddhism, a little bit of Hinduism, a little bit of Catholicism, a little bit of this, and kind of make up their own religion. Or they'll sell it for, well, all I really have to do is just be a good person.
Yeah.
And if I'm a good person, I mean, who cares about this mass and religion and prayer? Just be good to everybody. If everybody just did that, but here's the thing, Jesus is God. And that is not the standard that Jesus holds us to, right? So the rich young man, right, approached Jesus. What must I do to have eternal life? Well, Jesus says you have to follow the commandments. And Jesus lists 6 of them. And he goes, I've done that since my youth. Look how good I am. Right? I'm following the law.
Right.
Did Jesus say, well, just following the rules is good enough? Just kind of do it. Is that good? Well, you're just good to go. Just put it in cruise control. Just put it in neutral. Just coast your way into heaven. He didn't do that. He said, there's one more thing you must do. Take all your possessions, sell them, give it to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me. See, people don't want religion because they don't want to commit to anything. They just want to just float around and just like,
right,
do whatever. And see, and what is religion? Religion comes from a Greek word ligion. That's where we get the word ligament from. It means to join. So religion is to rejoin, right? Because we lost the faith, or we lost a relationship with God in the fall, and God has been trying to reestablish the relationship with us, and he does that completely and in its fullness in our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So religion means you're committing to something. Right? You're committing your life to something. And that's just not a place where a lot of people in our culture are today. So you have to go in with the mentality of evangelization, of understanding that, okay, then how do I meet this person in this space where they're not interested in religion, in rejoining anything or joining anything? What they want is, okay. So what we have to do is show them, why we are people of faith, why religion matters. Again, and you start off that conversation with the personal story and witness and go from there.
Again, 888-318-7884. If you'd like some tips for sharing the faith, Deacon Harold Burke Sivers, one of the very best, is here to help you with that. Your call's welcome, 888-318-7884. It doesn't sound too much like your strategy is babying people into it. It does sound like there's a kind of a challenge in it. I mean, I don't guess that you probably just meet people, like, I don't know, on the street and challenge them, but it sounds like at some point this involves a call to live a more robust, maybe even a more difficult life than people are living.
Yeah, so you can't be an effective evangelizer or witness to the faith unless you're evangelized yourself. Especially with teenagers, man, they can spot a fake a mile away. Teenagers, they have some carrots and they can tell, okay, this words are coming out of this guy's mouth, but he doesn't believe anything he's saying. And I mean, kids can tell. And so what you have to do is you have to be convicted yourself. So for us as Catholics, that is participating deeply in the sacramental life of the church. That means receiving Jesus in the Eucharist. That means going to Eucharistic adoration. That means going to receive the sacrament of reconciliation regularly. That means that, having possibly some spiritual direction. That means if you're a man belonging to a men's group or to a Bible study, always finding ways to enrich and enhance our life of faith so that when we meet others, we have something to give them. Because look, you can't give what you don't have. If someone asks me for $20 and my wallet's empty, I can't give them anything. So we have to fill ourselves with the richness and beauty and truth of the faith so that we can give ourselves to others. And the thing is this, I don't go out looking for these things. I don't go out and stop somebody's street. Hey, let me tell you about Jesus. I mean, that's just not me. What typically happens, Si, is that, I always wear, when I travel, I always wear a crucifix, right? Because I can't wear clerics as a permanent deacon, especially when I'm traveling or speaking. And so I always wear a crucifix. And sometimes on the plane, I'm not embarrassed or ashamed of my faith. I wear it openly on the plane with a miraculous medal. And people stop me and ask, hey, I like your necklace. Or hey, what does that mean? Or what denomination are you? It's like, right? So it's those kind of very simple openings that lead into a conversation about faith.
Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers, our guest. Lines are beginning to fill, but there are lines open. You are welcome to call 888-318-7884. We'll take a quick break, right back with more tips on sharing the faith with Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers on Catholic Answers Live right after this.
Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Are you ready to spread your wings? Wings is the weekly newsletter that's packed with exclusive news, program information, features, and updates of all that's going on at the Global Catholic Network. To sign up, go to EWTN.com, click subscribe, enter your name and email address, and you'll start getting your wings every week. Get your wings today. It's the weekly newsletter from EWTN, the Global Catholic Network.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I don't know if do we still have it's July. Do we still have the early bird special to if you're going to the conference? Check out CatholicAnswersConference.com. We'd love it if you'd come. I'm sure they have got the early bird special still going through the 4th of July. It's in September, the last full weekend of September each year. We get together here in San Diego. We get a great room rate over at the Hyatt, $175 a night, which is actually, I don't know, it's very low. I don't know if it's half, but it's very low for Southern California, and it's a great weekend to be here in this part of the country. So if you'd like to come, check it out, CatholicAnswersConference.com. Our guest this hour is Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers. We're talking about sharing the faith with one of the very best at sharing the faith. As a matter of fact, just before we went on the air, and I'm coming to calls, Jedediah, I'll get you to you first, but it's astounding to me, your travel. Where are you heading out to now?
Yeah, so tomorrow on the 4th of July, I'm heading to New Zealand. It'll be my first trip to New Zealand. I've been to 29 countries. This will be country number 30. And I'll be spending 4 days there. I'm being brought in by a group called Evangelion, which is a group that's dedicated to sharing the faith. I'll be there for 4 days, speaking at a university and some parishes. And then I'm going to Papua New Guinea for 4 days. And they're expecting a lot of people, from what I understand. Evidently, from what I'm told, when I saw the itinerary, the Papal Nuncio is going to be there, the Bishops' Conference is going to be there. And
you better
I'm
bring
speaking to... Oh, I know. I'm nervous.
Don't mess up in front of the Papal Nuncio.
I know. So, but I'm excited. Papua New Guinea. I always do research for countries I've never been to before, and Papua New Guinea. I was thinking, okay, what they weren't specific about what they wanted me to talk about. Just can be generalities, and I saw they have a huge issue with domestic violence, and against violence particularly violence against women. And I said, aha. Mulieris Dignitatem, John Paul II, and the idea of theology of femininity. So I'm going to make sure that's one of the talks that I'm giving. And then after 4 days there, I'm speaking to clergy. I'm speaking to religious members of parliament and government officials in a separate talk. Youth, a huge youth rally. They're expecting 10,000 youth at that, and then a talk for everyone. And then after that, I go to Australia for 10 days.
Good Lord.
Yeah, I know.
Good
I know.
Lord.
So, and I'll say hi to Charbel for you guys.
Oh,
there.
yeah, we love Charbel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm bringing them here in September. I'm bringing Charbel Raish and Robert Haddad, who's the Tim
he's
Staples
great.
of Australia. I know, yep, and Kevin Bailey. And I'm bringing them. They're going to be doing a 2-week speaking tour in the United States, and we're coming to the Catholic Answers Conference.
Oh, so Robert Haddad's coming to our conference?
Yes.
Because this
Yes,
guy
he
is a great apologist. He's one.
He
People
is.
don't know him here in the United States, but I'm so
and
glad.
that's why I'm bringing them. Yeah, I'm sponsoring them. And if people want to, help with the expenses for this, because I'm not, it's going to be, all the events are going to be free at parishes. We're going to Phoenix, then the LA, SoCal area, then to Kansas City, St. Louis, and Dallas.
So you said, you started a sentence, you got to finish it. How can people help if they want to help?
Yeah, just go to deaconharold.com and go to the donate, and just specifically put on there the Perusia USA tour. Perusia USA tour. Yeah.
Wonderful. And in addition to Robert Haddad, Charbel is wonderful talking about Islam and Christianity. People should hear him just talk about that. Well, good. That's great. I hope that there's folks, prayerful people right now listening who will pray for Deacon Harold, because prayer matters. When the evangelist goes out there, pray for him, especially, I don't know, for myself, for that message about peace in the home that he's going to bring to Papua New Guinea, but for success wherever he goes. I'm going to go to callers, Deacon, if you're ready.
Yeah, absolutely.
888-318-7884. Jedediah in Hastings, Nebraska, listening on Spirit Catholic Radio. Jedediah, we're glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for Deacon Harold.
Thank you for taking my call. I was curious if Deacon Harold could outline some of the responsibilities that godparents and sponsors have, and kind of dovetail that with sharing the faith as a lifelong relationship beyond the day of the ceremony.
Oh, Jedediah, that is a great question. And I don't think I've been asked that yet. That's fantastic. So here's the deal. In canon law, godparents, or formerly called sponsors, is an ecclesiastical office in the church. Okay, not like priest or bishop or deacon, something like that. But an ecclesiastical office in the sense that there are responsibilities that come with it. It's not just an honorific. You just don't become a godparent because, it's Jimmy's turn or Aunt Sally's turn to be God, and it's just there as an honor. No. There's responsibilities and obligations that come with accepting the role of a godparent. And your role is to basically help the parents with the spiritual development of that child. All right, so I'll give you a real life example. So I'm the godparent for several children. One of them now just turned 16 years old, right? So on her day.
Hey, Jedediah, I hope you can hang on for a quick second. We had a little.
Okay, we're back now.
Okay, we're back. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm the godparent for several children, but one in particular just turned 16. So what I do is on her birthday, I make sure I acknowledge, send a spiritual bouquet, or in actually a real bouquet of flowers or chocolate, something like that. On her saint's name day, also, and on the day of her baptism. And I always reach out and contact her. She has my contact information. If she has any questions spiritually, she can come and ask me. When I go on pilgrimages, I always bring back spiritual gifts for her, whether it be rosaries or different spiritual or religious items like that. So, to help have some visuals and some tangible things she can have there that will help her grow in her faith. And that's really what our job is. It's not just to be there, put on the official paperwork, you're the godparent. You're there for the spiritual development of that child for their entire life, right? So even when they become adults, you're still helping that person spiritually in their life. I hope that helps, Jedediah.
Jedediah, what do you think?
Yeah. That sounds wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, God bless you, and thank you for the call. Tell you what, I'm going to send you a little book we have called The Words of Eternal Life, True Happiness and Where to Find It. It's just a lovely little read about the Catholic faith from Jimmy Akin, and you can have it for you or give it, share it with someone else, but I'd just like you to have it. It was a beautiful call. 888-318-7884 is the number, 888-31-TRUTH. Deacon Harold Burke Sivers is here with us this hour, a great evangelist, a wonderful speaker and writer. And if you've got questions about sharing the faith in your home or in your community or wherever you are, 888-318-7884. Off to Oklahoma we go now. Jane is listening on 93.7 FM. Jane, thank you for waiting. Go ahead with your question for Deacon Harold.
Hi. Well, I was listening to Deacon Harold, and I appreciated his point about how you need to develop a rapport with the people with whom you're evangelizing. However, I detected a little bit of a patronizing sarcasm in his voice, and he probably did not really realize it. But it's something I hear a lot from clergy, and I think it's important that we change it. When he talks about people who say they're spiritual but not religious, his voice took a little bit of a sing-songy, sarcastic tone, and that is not the way to approach people who say that. So my question is, he used as an example that you have to be all in on religion, and the example was that Christ told the rich man to go and sell everything and come and follow him. So my question is whether Deacon Harold has sold everything that belonged to him.
Okay, a couple of things. First of all, when I was giving that example, the inflection and change in my voice was the representing how the culture portrays it. So people will say, well, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. I mean, so that is what you're talking about there. But when you're actually talking with someone, obviously you wouldn't say that to someone that you're trying to engage in a conversation, establish a rapport with. So that's the first thing. The second thing, as far as giving up everything, I had a career where I was making well into the six figures. And in 2012, I walked away from that to speak and to write and to dedicate the rest of my life to serving Christ and the Catholic faith. So the answer to your second question is yes. So, but let me give you an example of what I'm talking about, Jane. So going back to your first question, and I think I've told this story before. I was giving a talk for Theology on Tap. There was a young man there who was a bartender, not a person of faith at all. And during the talk, I asked a rhetorical question: how many of you would give your kids drugs and alcohol? And he sarcastically, I think trying to be funny, said, I would, and so I said, okay, I'm gonna have to talk to you when we're done. And everybody laughed. So afterward, he did come up to me. He goes, well, and I said to him, what parent in their right mind would give their kids drugs and alcohol? He said, it's like when I do the shrooms, man, which he meant hallucinogenic mushrooms, right? And he said, he said, there's this energy or this force of the universe, and we have to be one and connect with the energy of the universe. And the way I do that is I drive into the gorge, he means the Columbia River Gorge, and I walk into the woods and I find a beautiful spot and I eat the mushrooms, I get high. And when I get high, I feel connected to the rocks and to the trees and to the universe. So I'm listening to him. I said, let me understand what you're saying. You believe that there's something beyond yourself, something greater than yourself. You call it a force or energy. And you also feel this need to connect with this energy of the universe. And the way you do that is you drive to a beautiful place, you eat these mushrooms and get high. And in that euphoria, you feel connected to the rocks and the trees and everything around you and to the universe. He said, yeah. I said, I can totally appreciate where you're coming from. I said, let me tell you how we do it as Catholics. We also believe that there's something beyond ourselves that's greater than ourselves. We call him God. And we also feel this need to connect with the God of the universe. And the way we do that is we also drive to a beautiful place that's called church. And when we get to this beautiful place, we don't consume mushrooms and get high, but we consume what we call the Eucharist, what we believe to be the body, blood, soul, and divinity of the God of the universe. And when we consume that Eucharist, we are one with all the people we're worshiping with, We're one with nature and we're one with God himself. He was like, yeah, man, and I was like, yeah, man, so we made a connection. I didn't belittle him. I didn't patronize him. I didn't talk down to him. I listened to him and I entered into that conversation, bringing a perspective of faith, to what he said. So that's what I'm talking about there, Jane.
Jane, thank you for the call. You can hear the music. That's the hard break. We've got to take that break. The number is 888-318-7884. If you're looking for tips on how to share the faith, maybe with someone you have in mind that you've been wanting to share the faith with, maybe a member of the family, a friend, someone at work, Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers is here to help. 888-318-7884. Are you ready to defend your faith in a world of unbelief? Join us at the 9th Annual Catholic Answers Apologetics Conference. This year's theme, I Believe in God, and it'll help you provide clear and charitable answers to atheism, agnosticism, and plain old indifference. Don't miss what promises to be the event of the season. Join us in San Diego from September 21st through 24th as we welcome our special guest, Dr. Scott Hahn, and an all-star lineup of great Catholic speakers. Spend quality time with your favorite Catholic Answers apologists and enjoy 4 days of fun, fellowship, and adoration of the Almighty. Seats are still available, but they're going fast. Visit CatholicAnswersConference.com or call 888-291-8000 to register. Enter promo code EARLY and save $50. That's CatholicAnswersConference.com.
Want to know more about the origins of the Catholic Church? Joe Heschmeyer explores the beginnings of Christianity in The Early Church Was the Catholic Church. Joe digs deep into the words and actions of those who lived right after the apostles to refute anti-Catholic claims of how the faith was lived back then. Order your copy of The Early Church Was the Catholic Church today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
What if the voice of your deepest doubts about Catholicism rose up in the form of a human being and challenged you to defend your most foundational beliefs? That's the task apologist Trent Horn took upon himself in his new book, Devil's Advocate, a dialogue with his own best objections against the faith that he professes and defends. You can stand up against your doubts, and Trent will show you how. Pick up your copy of Devil's Advocate today at shop.catholic.com or at a good Catholic bookstore near you. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers is our guest. Is it deaconharold.com?
Yes.
Is that it, deaconharold.com? Just go to deaconharold.com, find out about him. You can get him to come speak where you are. I'll tell you what, two things are going to happen when you have him as a speaker. You're going to draw a crowd, and that crowd is going to be fired up. Especially if you can get men together to come here, Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers, you should do it. The number here, if you want to just talk with him about sharing the faith with others, 888-318-7884. I'm very aware that many people are on the road and may not have heard us before, so I just want to keep letting you know who we are. It's called Catholic Answers, our organization. We're in Southern California, San Diego, as a matter of fact, and you can find us at Catholic.com. You can send us an email at radio@Catholic.com if you ever want to send an email, radio@Catholic.com. But what you could really do is pick up the phone and call if you've got a question for Deacon Harold, 888-318-7884. I want to ask you this because you wrote the book on Father Tolton, and he suffered a great deal, but he didn't become a bitter jerk. And so I just want to ask you about the role of not necessarily the role of suffering, but the role of the willingness to suffer in evangelizing, in sharing the good news.
Yeah, I think that's really important because Jesus says, if you are to be my disciple, right? And the disciple is one who hears, understands, accepts, and puts into practice by the witness of their life, the teachings of Jesus Christ and the Catholic faith. You must deny yourself, pick up your cross, and follow me. So inherent in discipleship is suffering. But remember, for us as people of faith, suffering is redemptive, right? There's a purpose and there's a teleology to suffering. It's not just, dealing with the pain. It's a participation in the suffering of Christ. Psalm 90, which is the one psalm written by Moses, he says, our span is 70 years or 80 for those who are strong. And most of these are emptiness and pain, or actually in Hebrew, toil and pain. They pass swiftly and we are gone. Right? So even Moses in the Psalms recognizes that suffering is an inherent part of life. So it's not trying to avoid what our culture does. We try to avoid suffering because we think it's ultimately meaningless. For us as Christians, it's about finding meaning in the suffering that's unavoidable.
Right.
So suffering comes. For example, I was giving a talk last year at a middle school, and I'm not going to say where this middle school was. It's supposed to be a Catholic school, okay? And just in passing, I didn't go into any detail at all. This was middle school kids. I didn't go into any detail. The talk was called Truth, Freedom, and the Human Person. So I was talking about some challenges that we have in the culture today. And just in passing, I mentioned, for example, we live in a culture that says that a child in the womb is not a person, it's a blob of tissue, that old people are worthless. And so we have to euthanize them or offer them assisted suicide, even those who are terminally ill, to avoid suffering. Marriage is a man and woman. Boys are actually males and girls are actually female. Just in passing, just like that.
Right,
and
right.
So I got some, there were some parents and some teachers there, and I got, this just show you some of the emails I got. One of them said, you chose to use this venue to express your values regarding trans, gay, abortion, and euthanasia issues. I did not appreciate your intensity or tone when your long, meandering narrative landed on these topics. I didn't go into any detail. I literally just mentioned them in passing, just like I did just now. This audience was not the appropriate place for you to indulge in your aggressive, bizarre, shameful behavior. I thought you were angry, weird, and creepy. And this is a separate email. You came across as a bozo, a fanatical Catholic weirdo, and someone who didn't seem very bright. So
wow.
So that's the suffering, okay? Just a couple of months ago, I gave that exact same talk at another Catholic middle school. And I got a note from the principal that said, I just wanted to share with you, because I came home from being away for a week, and I had this envelope that was like several inches thick. And I thought, oh boy, somebody sent me a manuscript, that they want me to read or something like that. So I opened it up, and on the cover of it was a letter from the principal. I wanted to share with you how much the students enjoyed your visit.
So
grandparents.
Yeah.
It was amazing. And then the kids, the stack was all these like handwritten, not just little notes, but letters, like full on letters by some of the students. It was beautiful. One of them said, sometimes I feel like God doesn't want me anymore, but now I know that he will always want me. You made me think about how much of a role God plays in my life. I'm very excited to share what you told me and apply it to my life. Another one said, you are an inspiration. I've personally been going through a hard time trying to stand firm in my faith in today's world, but you have helped me to succeed in expressing my faith even more. Now I feel that I can get through almost anything with God by my side and your words in my mind.
Isn't that something?
Now, Cy, that's the exact same talk that I gave at the other school. Look at the reactions, right? So the one is the suffering, but the other one is the redemption. Right?
Yeah, that's right. It's so indicative though of, and I think it's why many people are afraid to talk. And I'm so glad that you're not, because you are going to get those negative reactions, but that is not the end of the story. And even in that school where parents couldn't process what you were saying and had a little fit and had to send you those notes, some kid is going to process it. Some kid is going to understand it and be edified by it.
Yeah, and at the end of the talk, the kids were clapping, and a couple of yelled out, "When are you coming back?" Yeah. So, And I didn't
Yeah.
get any letters from the kids.
No.
These were letters from the parents and some teachers.
Yeah.
But what was beautiful about the second school, these were the kids themselves. Now remember, Bishop Barron said the age that we're losing kids to the culture, where they made the intellectual decision, I'm no longer Catholic, is 13 years old.
Yep. Yep.
And you just heard excerpts. So I mean, I can show you. I got the stack behind me here of those letters. These are 11, 12, 13-year-olds.
Yeah, so you've just got to be willing to take the good with the bad, or the bad with the good, maybe is the way to say it, because we live in a world of the wheat is mixed in with the chaff, and it's wild that you would go into a Catholic school and say something like a boy is a boy and a girl is a girl, and someone would say that's weird and creepy that you think that. That is wild. But I hope what people will hear from that is not, oh, you should be more afraid, but you should be less afraid. Stop worrying about what people think, because you could say the most basic things that everybody agreed on 2 years ago, like that a boy is a boy and a girl is a girl, and it's going to upset somebody. Stop worrying about it. Share the good news.
I'm not going to lie to you, Si, it hurt. When I read those, when the emails first came, I was hurt.
Yeah.
And I thought, what did I say? I mean, and again, what creeps into your mind, right? Maybe I should pull back. Maybe I should water it down. Maybe because how I speak, Si, I'm passionate.
Right.
But some people interpret passion as anger. And I can't remember the last time I was angry. I literally cannot remember
the
last
you're saying.
time I was. See,
Yeah.
you know the why. I'm passionate and my voice gets elevated. I'm using I grew up around Italians, right?
Yeah.
So I'm using my hands a lot. And so they're not used to people presenting the faith that way. So it came across them as being angry, whereas I gave the same presentation. I prayed to the Holy Spirit and I said, nope, don't change anything. I gave the exact same talk, didn't change a word. And much different reaction, the same passion. In fact, some of the kids said, I love your passion, enthusiasm, excitement.
Right.
And so it's just, how people hear the gospel. Some people don't like my style. And that's okay.
No.
Then don't come see me. Don't invite me to your parish. And that's fine.
Right.
People like the cerebral, academic, classroom, talking head presentation, and that's fine. And I love sitting through presentations, because what matters ultimately, Si, is the content.
Yeah.
What are you saying? Are you bringing me to deeper intimacy with Christ? Yes, you can be more passionate like I am, or you can be more like a talking head. It doesn't matter. What ultimately matters is the content. And how is this bringing me into deeper intimacy with the Lord and helping me share my faith with others?
Again, 888-318-7884, the number. Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers, our guest. We're going to Dylan in Aurora, Illinois, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Dylan, thanks for downloading the app onto your phone. Thanks very much for the call. Go ahead with your question for Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers.
Hey, thank you very much.
So Dylan's question?
Here he goes. Go ahead, Dylan.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
We can, yeah.
Delightful. Hey, so my question was regarding just having conversations with people and, delving into apologetics and such. And so one thing I really noticed, especially people with a more naturalistic, materialistic sort of framework, I often notice they kind of have like a Christian presupposition. And I want to see if you could help me try to elaborate on it. So oftentimes, I should say, as Christians, we believe, all people are equal and made in the image of God, inherently valuable and all that. But I find that people on a naturalistic framework kind of smuggle in that sort of Judeo-Christian presupposition in and reject the author of, that belief. So I'm just wondering if there is a kind way to kind of point that out, because, oftentimes a common retort will be, what, you think without God you're just going to go around killing people? And it can get very defensive pretty quick. So I'm just wondering if there's a cordial and considerate way to kind of talk about that with someone.
Okay, thanks, Dylan.
Yeah, thank you, Dylan, very much. So one of the things that we're in a situation like that is, first of all, not to get defensive and take it personally, right? Because when I hear someone that's more aggressive like that, or seems to take an attacking tone, or is trying to, like you said, kind of echo back kind of this pseudo faith in their response to me, what I'm hearing is, I'm hurting, please help me. I'm lost, please show me the way. And because they don't have an authentic Christian framework, they're trying to use our words against us, right? So what I do in a situation, for example, with an atheist, I'm not going to go through the whole thing because this took about 15 minutes with the guy, but I was literally shopping, and I think I was getting beans or corn or something like that, and I was leaning over getting the can, and this guy comes the other way, and I was wearing my crucifix, miraculous metal, and the cart stopped. I didn't pay any attention to it, but when I looked up, the guy was looking at me. And he saw the crucifix. Oh, you're one of those Jesus freaks. Your religion is the cause for all the problems in the world today. He just went into this diatribe. And then at the end, he goes, and you can't even prove to me that your God exists. And I said, oh, well, how about I show you that it's possible that God could exist? How about that? And so he said, okay. And so I took my cell phone out, and I put it on the shelf, and I said, is my phone moving right now, yes or no? And he said, yes, it is moving. I said, because the earth is moving. I said, okay, look, relative to the rotation of the earth, is the phone moving, yes or no? He said, no. I said, in order for that phone to move from where it's sitting right now, what do I have to apply to that object? He said, a force, right? This is mass times acceleration. So in order for that phone to move, I have to pick it up, knock it over, tornado has to come. There has to be some force that moves that phone from a state of potential to actual motion, from a state of rest to unrest. And or else the phone will not move, because physics says an object that is at rest will continue to remain at rest until impelled by a force. And he said, yes, that's logic and science. I said, do we have objects in the universe that are moving? He thought about it. I said, it's not a trick question. He said, yes, of course. The earth is moving. The moon is moving. They're rotating around the sun. We have comets and meteorites and light. All kinds of things are moving. And you just agreed with me that things don't move unless impelled by a force. What caused all the motion in the first place? And he said, the Big Bang. And I said, amen, because that theory was developed by a Catholic priest. No, it wasn't. I said, get out your phone, type in Father George Lemaitre. Let me spell it for you. Tell me what the search results say. So he went it, and sure that I think it was the third one. He goes, the founder of the Big Bang theory. He goes, oh. I said, okay, so you said the Big Bang. Great. What caused the Big Bang? And he had no answer, right? And so I did two more examples like that. And all three examples, he had no answer. And in these examples, Dylan, I never once mentioned God. Not once. I didn't once mention faith. I just used his language, right, to show. Now, those three examples, what were they? They were three of the five proofs of the existence of God by St. Thomas Aquinas. But I disguised them in a way that he was able to hear what I'm saying. Because okay, we're back again. So Dylan, if I were to say to him, okay, let me prove to you God exists. Here's what St. Thomas Aquinas says. He doesn't know who Jesus is. He don't care who St. Thomas Aquinas is. So what we have to do is take this rich, deep, beautiful faith and turn it into a cell phone, right? Just like I did. And so does that help at all, Dylan, that example?
Yeah, no, I think that is very helpful. I guess, I don't know if there's anything specific you would address with like the human worth, dignity, and intrinsic aspect of it, or if that's more you're thinking of just kind of repackaging and reframing the conversation as kind of a solution.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So in that case, to be honest with you, the best person I've ever seen on that issue in a more adversarial relationship is Trent Horn. He has a training. I don't know if I have it. Let me see if I have it bookmarked here. I used to have it bookmarked. It's an amazing training that he did, which I believe was in the Archdiocese of San Francisco, where he's talking about training people how to have these kinds of conversations about human life and the dignity of the human person when someone's being aggressive to you. It was so well done. And I refer that training to people all the time. So Trent Horn is amazing. So on that specific one, you want tools on how to effectively evangelize in that realm and that environment, Trent Horn is definitely the go-to person for that.
I'd like to continue the conversation, but I'm a little bit late for a break, so I got to take the break. We'll be right back with more Sharing the Faith with Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers on Catholic Answers Live.
Let us help you with your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
EWTN, helping people grow in their love and understanding of God.
I just want to share that 5 years ago, my lovely warrior princess and saint of a wife and I decided to adopt a little girl through foster care. She is the perfect round out of our family of 3 boys and her. Yes, there are challenges. Very grateful today for all the blessings that he has shown our family.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
If you've never been to EWTN's free family celebration, this is your year. Your EWTN family is waiting for you where it all began in Birmingham, Alabama. Join us Saturday, August 26th as we celebrate Mother Angelica's love for the Eucharist and mark the centennial year of Mother's birth. For more information on this free event, visit EWTN.com/family celebration. We want to see you there.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers is our guest. I'm realizing how different I am from Deacon Harold. If somebody in the grocery store looked at my crucifix and said, your religion caused all the troubles in the world, my answer would not be like, okay, let's talk about that. I would point and I'd say, look, there's a bear over there. And when they looked, I would run away. That's how I would deal with that, because that would freak me out. I can't believe you just go, oh, okay, let's talk about this. I'd be like looking at his hands. Does he have a weapon?
Well, no, it's funny because a lot of people would freeze up like a deer in the headlights.
Oh, I would.
Or try to get out of that situation or attack back.
Yeah.
But when you, and I mean, I'm in my 50s now, right? So there's a certain level of maturity, and you do see a few of the books that I have behind me here.
Yeah.
And so I do read them. And so I try, and when I get in the airport and I'm walking between gates or I'm sitting on the plane, which I do frequently,
Yeah.
I'm thinking about what if someone came up to me right now and said this? What would I say? How would I respond? And I kind of rehearse in my head, so I take these wonderful books that I have, and I take the knowledge that I gain from them and say, how do I take this and apply it to the everyday lived experience? So it's not just an ivory tower.
So you're ready when the time comes.
Yeah, not information swimming in my head, but how do I take the head and the heart and connect them in a way that gets the faith across to people so they'll want to hear, again, more of what I have to say.
But you made a choice, too, because that guy said to you, your religion has caused all the problems that the world has, and you can't prove that your God exists. You ignored the first part, the accusation, and you just went calmly with the second thing, which I think there's a lesson in that right there for anybody listening, that it's possible to not go, you're wrong, my religion never did, and then start listing all the saints or something. You can just let it go and move on to something that'll allow you to open the conversation.
And what helped me in that respect, Si, was actually marriage. Because I was a Benedictine, right? So when I left the monastery and got involved in a serious relationship and I ultimately got married, sometimes women, when they say things, they say something, but that's not really what they want to say. There's something deeper there. So I've learned over the years to ignore the stuff. But let's get to really what the real question is or what the real issue is.
Yeah.
And so I apply that same mode of listening to these conversations about evangelization.
That's wonderful.
Well.
Marriage is supposed to be a school in charity, and yeah, that's what it's been. Let's go to Atlanta, Georgia. Ryan, listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM Satellite Radio. Ryan, go ahead with your question for Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers.
Hey, my question is, how do you share your faith in somewhere where you're not supposed to talk about religion, like the workplace and the office?
That's a great question. Yeah. So I would say this. Sometimes you can say things without saying them, right? So, for example, your witness and example, how you talk to people, how you do your job. For example, Ryan, when I first moved to Oregon, I worked for the Salem School District, and I was head of police services and security. And at that time, there was the Columbine, all those things going on. So I was doing a number of safety and security trainings at the schools. And I was coming out of 1205 Mass that I tried to go to every day when I worked in Salem. And a woman came up and tapped me on the shoulder. And I turned around. She goes, "I knew there was something about you." And I said, "Excuse me?" She said, I'm a teacher in the schools here, and you came and did a training for our staff at the school. And I could tell, you didn't mention Jesus or faith or God or anything like that, but I can tell when you spoke to us, you were interested more than not just the building, the school district's assets, or the buildings, or any. You cared about us. See, so how could she pick that up? Even though I never talked about faith, I didn't wear a crucifix, nothing like that, but she still could tell that I cared about them. See, so that's the same kind of ethos that we have to develop when we're going into workplace, right? How do you treat your fellow coworkers, right? And when someone's talking about someone behind their back, do you step and say, "Hey, wait a minute, that's not cool," and we should show them the same respect that they want to show to us, or something like that.
Yeah.
So they can tell there's something there, and maybe that will lead to a deeper question. And another quick example I have, Ryan, I was in Singapore. I've been in Singapore 4 or 5 times, but I think the third time I was there, I was invited by the Singapore government to help give a talk on marriage. And they said I couldn't talk about Jesus. So I'm thinking to myself, how do I give a talk about, marriage and kids without talking about Jesus? And the reason for that, it was a public talk. And their rules for public talks is you can't talk specifically about any kind of religious tradition. So it doesn't matter if you're Buddhist, Muslim, Hindu, Christian. It wasn't discrimination. It was like, that's just their rule for public talks. And so, and I have pictures on my Facebook page. It was at Singapore Management University. The place was packed. I mean, it was 2-tiered auditorium, packed. People were sitting on the floor, standing in the back. And I walked out there and I gave a talk on marriage, never mentioning Jesus once. And when they did exit polling after the talk, and these were mostly Buddhists, Muslims, and Hindus, and Christians that were there. The lowest rating, they give a scale of 1 to 5, 90.
Oh wait, 90 what? He cut out on us. We were just about to get the statistic. Deacon Harold, you cut out.
93% of the people gave me a 4 or a 5, and the rest gave me a 3. Not bad for giving a public talk about marriage without talking about the faith. So, Ryan, I hope that helps, that it's possible. Because what did I do? I made a connection with the natural moral law, right? Because that's something that was planted by God, even though they may not believe in God, but there's something there. And Paul talks about this in Romans chapter 1 and Romans chapter 2, about knowing the coming to know the unseen God, how we can know about God through nature and through the environment. And so I helped make those connections, and people got it. So I hope that's helpful for you, Ryan.
Okay, Ryan?
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. It's hard to live in such a way that the Christianity comes through, even in a place where, like maybe you work in a government job or something. But I have had that experience of where you're at the DMV, where you're the most anonymous creature in the world, but that person is treating you in a way that there's something special about that person. And sometimes only later I'll notice, oh, they've got a cross over here, or they've got, so that in other words, preaching with your behavior is very hard work. But you think people don't notice, but they do.
They do.
Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers is our guest. Please pray for him as he heads off across the Pacific to talk in New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, and Australia. And Deacon, if you would give us and our listeners your blessing before you go, please.
Sure. May Almighty God bless you and keep you, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. Safe travels.
Thank you.
All right, coming up, Dr. Francis Beckwith will be with us. He's one of the speakers at our upcoming conference. We're going to talk to him about church and state, religion and government. It's a hot button issue here in the U.S. Tomorrow's the 4th of July. Perfect time to talk about it. Your calls are welcome. 888-318-0033. 7884. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host, and you might want to get on the line now if you want to talk with Dr. Francis Beckwith this hour from Baylor University. We're going to talk about church and state and religious liberty and all these things. And with the recent Supreme Court decisions and all this, that's going on here in the United States, where we have very clearly expressed religious rights and rights to free expression, more clearly probably than they are expressed anywhere else in the world in our Constitution. And we're struggling over this. And if you've got questions about it, if you've got questions about what the church teaches about it, questions about how to live what the church teaches in a society that's having these kinds of struggles, 888-318-7884 is the number, 888-318-7884. Tomorrow, I just want to let you know, before we bring Dr. Beckwith on, that tomorrow we have a 4th of July show for you. It's 4th of July weekend. I'm going to just say we're in the 4th of July weekend right now because the traffic would suggest I was the only one that went to work today. So I think the rest of you are all off today. And if you're off, I want you to know we've got a 4th of July show for you, and it's a good 4th of July show. The second hour tomorrow, we'll have Deacon Stephen Gradanas back with us from Decent Films, and we're going to review the summer movies. And he's got some things to say about the new Indiana Jones movie that are just amazing. He has wonderful insight into films from the Catholic perspective. So join us for the second hour for Deacon Stephen Gradanas. And then first hour, we welcome a bishop of an archdiocese with which you might be familiar, with which you might not, the United States military as its own archdiocese, because there are millions of people in the United States military. It stretches all around the world. It's the largest, geographically, diocese in the world. And Deacon Joseph Coffey, who's one of the bishops, an auxiliary bishop in the Archdiocese for the Military Services, will be here with us, and he's going to talk about what it's like to be in the military right now. He's going to talk about what it's like to be a chaplain in the military, why men should consider being chaplains in the military, but he'll also give us some reflections on patriotism in this time of difficulty, and on ways that we can support both those who are in the service of our country right now, in the military service of our country right now, and those who are veterans. So we didn't lay down on the job. We put together a pretty darn good 4th of July program for you, and we'll have brand new programming each day this week. We're not going to we're going to shirk our job. Brand new programming each day this week. Again, the number here is 888-318-7884. Our guest is Dr. Francis Beckwith, who teaches at Baylor University, prolific author, and he'll be among the featured speakers at our Catholic Answers Conference this September. Dr. Beckwith, thank you so much for being here with us.
Great. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I want to start by asking you about the Supreme Court decision that came down on okay, so we have gay marriage in the United States now, which was an issue that the courts settled. It wasn't settled by the voters, but the courts decided it, and we're a very civil society, so we all go along with what the courts tell us we got to go along with. Mm. But then there are people who say, yeah, okay, I get it, that's the law of the land now, but I don't want to participate in a way that compromises my religious or moral beliefs in gay weddings. So there's the case that was decided was actually decided in favor of, and she is constantly referred to everywhere in the media as a Christian website designer. Because people, they want to make clear that this is a conflict that Christians have. I think often they're attempting to make it a conflict over the lifestyle of gay people and not about the religion of the person who is objecting. But she won, and the commentary is, well, I mean, the sky is falling. This is using the First Amendment to back up bigotry and all of that. So I just want to start right there. Is this symptomatic of the entire culture, and what are we to make of this? How should we frame what just was decided?
Yeah, so the case dealt with, it's called 303 Creative versus, I forget the defendant, I think it's the state of Colorado. It involved a conflict between you mentioned gay marriage, and of course it did involve a individual who owned this website. She owned a business that designed websites, and she, as a devout Christian, said that she could not in any way cooperate with or create something honoring a same-sex marriage. And she also included other sorts of activity, just racial bigotry, violence, all sorts of other things that she could not participate in. But sexual orientation is a protected class in the state of Colorado, as it is with many other states. And a protected class within something called public accommodations. That is, if you have a business, let's say you have a grocery store or a clothier, you can't deny business to someone based on a whole array of characteristics, including religion, sexual orientation, race, nationality, gender, etc. So she made the argument that even though her objection to same-sex marriage is motivated in her religion, ultimately the job of creating a website and designing is a form of expression. And so she didn't appeal to the free exercise clause of the First Amendment, which is the clause that says that the government cannot interfere with religious free exercise in any direct way. She appealed to the part of the Constitution that dealt with freedom of speech or freedom of expression. And so a good way to think about it is this way. Imagine a gay website designer approached by the Westboro Baptist Church. Westboro Baptist Church is a very vehement anti-gay church. Not only do they object to homosexuality, they go to the funerals of fallen soldiers who've defended this country, saying that because you defended this country, you're a wicked person because this is a wicked country, and they hurl epitaphs at the funerals of these individuals. So, at the relatives that are present there. I mean, let's suppose you had a gay website designer who said, "Look, I don't want to design a website for the Westboro Baptist Church. This case protects him from that kind of coercion by the state, because after all, Westboro Baptist is a church and religion is a protected class. So if we're going to coerce this young woman who is the web designer, then the government could also coerce the gay web designer as well. And I think anyone wants to live in a country where people cannot express their views, or in which the government itself coerces citizens to assert things that they don't believe in. That seems to me to be so fundamental to the character of this country that I think the only reason why you're hearing portrayals of this case in such a distorted fashion is because if it were presented in an accurate fashion, people would say, well, what's the big deal? This is kind of just what we've always believed.
Okay, I'm so happy that you kind of set the table there for us, because the rhetoric is extreme in this regard, as if a new right is being carved out. As a matter of fact, The Hill, the news source of Washington, D.C., one of the news sources, a new and mysterious constitutional right to discriminate. That's a headline that they have. So, I mean, we want to have a conversation. We don't just want to have an argument, but I don't know where to begin a conversation if that is the reaction to what the Supreme Court decided.
Yeah, a couple of things go through my mind when I hear about headlines like the one in The Hill and several commentators that I've heard and read about online. Either they just didn't read the opinion, or they did read it and couldn't comprehend it, or they read it and comprehended it, are not telling the truth intentionally. I mean, those are really the only options we have. And I understand, I hold strong views, as I'm sure most of your listeners do, on a variety of matters, and I want people to ultimately agree with me, and I try to persuade them. But I think to have a conversation where we all agree that the truth is important, we have to be honest with each other, right? I mean,
right.
This is the thing that I think really is infuriating. Is not that people disagree or don't think that the court reasoned the right way, but that they present it in it's just not what the opinion said. I mean, there's a case back that's actually cited a couple of times in 303 Creative by Justice Gorsuch, who wrote the majority. It's a case called West Virginia versus Barnett. West Virginia versus Barnett was a case involving Jehovah's Witness kids that were in an elementary school in West Virginia who refused to salute the flag and utter the Pledge of Allegiance because under Jehovah's Witness theology, that is a form of idolatry. They believe that to pledge your allegiance to the flag is in fact to make a commitment to something less than God. Now, there are reasons that we may reject the Jehovah's Witness view from a theological perspective, but the Supreme Court winds up ruling in favor of the kids. Imagine at the time, in 1943, the headline read, Supreme Court supports unpatriotic citizens who won't fight Hitler. Right? I mean, that's all technically true, right? Because Jehovah's Witnesses are pacifists. They won't fight anybody, right? So, but here's the point. That would be at least it would be technically, first off, it wouldn't be accurate that they're unpatriotic, right? So if you would frame a case of coerced speech, that's what Justice Robert Jackson, who wrote the majority in that case, said. This is a case of coerced speech. Even though they're motivated by religion, the government can't force people to affirm beliefs that they disagree with. And so, but if a paper at the time had framed it as unpatriotic citizens who won't fight Hitler supported by the Supreme Court, that would be a distortion of what actually happened. And I think you're getting a version of that
here
today with what you read about in The Hill.
Francis Beckwith is our guest. We're going to take a very quick break. We'll be right back. Your questions are welcome. You want to talk about the church and state? You want to talk about freedom of religion? That's what we're going to talk about right now in this show before the 4th of July. 888-318-7884.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
If it's central to the faith, you can find it on EWTN Podcast Central, featuring the best of EWTN Radio, as well as faith-filled podcasts from our friends and affiliates across the nation, all in one place, all free. The destination for great Catholic audio programming is EWTN Podcast Central. It's like podcast heaven. Visit EWTN.com/radio/podcasts today.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Our guest is Dr. Francis Beckwith. If you'd like to meet him in person and hear what he has to say, he will be one of the featured speakers at our Catholic Answers Conference in September. You can check it all out at CatholicAnswersConference.com. CatholicAnswersConference.com. I can remember as a 13-year-old, Dr. Beckwith, the Nazis wanted to march in Skokie, Illinois. And this paralyzed the country for a few weeks while courts tried to decide. And it seems to me since then, since 13, every, 15 or 20 years, we have to relitigate free speech and freedom of religion and all of that. And so in a certain sense, I think right now, because of the Obergefell decision, we're just having to work out, okay, what are the implications? And by the way, the Nazis did march in Skokie, Illinois, and it was horrific because many Holocaust survivors lived there. Mm-hmm. But the courts found, just because you don't like it, you can't tell people that they can't fly their Nazi flag. And and the Nazis, well, I guess I was going to say are clearly a lot worse than this website maker, but I don't think many people. I think there's people that don't believe that. I think they think a Christian website maker who won't do a gay wedding site is probably worse than those Nazis. Why do you think that we have come to this fraught moment where what used to be so clear, this religious freedom and First Amendment protection, seems so frail again? Why do you think we have come to this moment?
I think it has a lot to do with just the nature of the culture wars in this country, in the sense that you have, in order to achieve certain goals, certain rhetoric had to be used. That is, in order to achieve something like Obergefell, individuals who were skeptical of same-sex marriage, who held traditional views, are bigots and evil and so forth. And I'm not, the old-fashioned way of dealing with an issue like this was to, especially since it involves a question of sexual morality, the sort of typical old-fashioned liberal view of dealing with an issue like this would be people from different points of view and different traditions hold reasonable perspectives, and we have to figure out how to get along in a country of deep disagreement. That sort of thing. Now, there are flaws in that approach, to be sure. I've actually written critical pieces against that form of liberalism, but at least that form of liberalism had the virtue of understanding that not everybody who doesn't hold, let's say, permissive views on sexuality or holds traditional views on moral theology are monsters, and so the problem is the rhetoric is used to get that goal. That is to say, the only thing that will fulfill justice is to have something like same-sex marriage codified in our Constitution. But then we have at least half the country, maybe a little less, a little more, who are ambivalent about this, right? They may actually think that, as you said at the very beginning of the program, the Supreme Court has made its decision. There's no turning back. But we also live in a country where people hold views about sexual morality that are so deeply ingrained in their religious traditions, and they don't arise from any sort of animus against gay people or anything like that. It's just what people believe has not only been revealed to them by God, but is also good for us as human beings. It's the way our nature is ordered. Again, there are going to be citizens who think that's crazy. It's a mistaken view. But in a free society, you're just going to bound to have people that hold these different views, right? So the problem is the rhetoric that gets us there says that most of the country holds irredeemably wicked views about homosexuality, and that has to be stamped out. On the other hand, though, you saw for most of that fight a kind of libertarian defense of intimacy, right? Whatever consenting adults do is nobody else's business. The government should stay out of the bedroom. Marriage is just a piece of paper, right? All this sort of kind of libertine views. And so at some point, something's got to give. You can't have this kind of high moralism about anyone who agrees with you and at the same time use rhetoric, at least early on in the revolution, that asserts that, live and let live, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I do think that we're seeing it. We're seeing it cast out in the courts right now, and that's why I think that the 303 case is it seems to be a kind of ordinary American free speech case to me. It just doesn't seem that radical, and yet I do think if you have lived for the past 2 decades on a steady diet of anyone who doesn't agree with the pieties of the sexual revolution is a completely wicked, evil person, you're going to come to believe that the owner of 303 Creative is really bad.
Yeah,
You know?
right. That's right.
So-
But and what you said though is that like if my religious beliefs include an understanding of homosexual sex acts as immoral, those don't arise from a hatred of gay people or an animosity, but many people they don't have. And I actually got this idea from you, so I'm turning it back to you. So I don't want to take credit for the question, but as a matter of fact, because the idea of the question comes from your own statements. But there's many people in the country today who have no experience of religion, and so when I say I have my religion gives birth to this morality, and this morality says no, those acts are not moral acts. The person cannot understand that because they don't know what religion is or what it does.
Yeah, that's right. I also think along the same lines that they also tend to think that anything connected to religion is by its very nature not rational. Even though they may not, although they may not explicitly think it, it's presupposed. I'll give you one example of how I encountered this type of thinking about almost 20 years ago now. I was speaking at Texas Tech University Law School in Lubbock, and I'd given a talk on issues in theology, science, and law. And afterwards, one of the professors, not from the law school, but from one of the sciences, who was in the audience, raised his hand and he said, "All you've given us are religious arguments." And it was weird because the arguments I gave were just about the law. That was, although I dealt with how the law dealt with conflicts between theology and science in public school, in the public school context. Well, he doesn't ask me a question. He asserts, "All you've given us are religious arguments." And I paused for a moment and I said, "Wow, I'm relieved. I thought you were going to say I had given you bad arguments." And he kind of looked at me and I said, "Well, see what you've done. You've assumed that if I had given you just arguments, that they just weren't even worthy of assessment." And I think part of the problem is that especially on issues of human sexuality, and especially for those of us who are Catholic, the Catholic view is that, yes, Scripture reveals to us how we ought to conduct our lives concerning intimacy, but also natural reason can be helpful as well. And so for this reason, you find, even outside of Christianity or Catholicism, philosophical arguments about fidelity in marriage, how to treat children. This is why he's preaching, he says to his audience, a good father would not give his son a loaf of bread and say that it's a scorpion, right? Well, he's kind of assuming that they know what good parents are, right? You know?
Right.
So there's a kind of, even Jesus is kind of using natural reason. So, so in any event, there's again, it may be just because we're Catholic, we tend to think, and I think rightly, that there are things that we can only know through special revelation. There are things that we can know through reason, and there are things that kind of overlap. So I think issues of sexuality are those issues where we kind of have intuitions about the wrongness of adultery and the misuse of our sexual power. Sometimes that can be suppressed or distorted by how we grew up or our life experience. So we need revelation to help us to clarify it, right? So Scripture tells us that you shouldn't commit adultery, divorce is wrong, and so forth. Something you probably couldn't get directly through natural reason that easily.
Right. I think many people, now in the decade after all the battles over gay marriage, those of us who argued and continue to argue that marriage is between a man and a woman, that it's rooted in the nature of human beings and joining the sexes and procreating children and all of that, we lost everywhere except in Africa. We lost everywhere. So now I think it feels to us like we're not so much fighting for marriage as for a place in the world that has rejected our view of marriage. We might accept that defeat and say, okay, we got our tail handed to us everywhere, but we still want to live in this world with our beliefs. Do you think that's actually what's happening, that we lost and now we're fighting for our place?
I think that's right. I think there's a couple of things that we're not only fighting for our place, we're also fighting for our institutions, our way of life. So one of the, I think, encouraging things about recent Supreme Court decisions is that the court recognizes that that religious institutions do in fact have a right to conduct their affairs in a way to advance their beliefs. And
well, let's take a break. We'll come back and we'll take some calls and we'll continue the conversation. Catholic Answers Live with Dr. Francis Beckwith. Want to get right to the core of Christ's saving message? Want a roadmap for living the life Christ calls you to? It's time to look again at the Beatitudes. In his new book, Heart of the Gospel, How the Beatitudes Show Us God's Plan for Happiness, Father Sebastian Walsh demonstrates compellingly how these 8 declarations make up the foundation, the essence, and the final goal of Jesus' teaching. Heart of the Gospel illuminates the scriptural passages from which we get the Beatitudes, explains the significance of their wording, their order, and their timing in Jesus' ministry. And it draws out edifying parallels and connections with salvation history and the lives of the saints. Most importantly, Father Walsh offers wise counsel from his own work as a priest and teacher to help you live the Beatitudes in your own life. Order your copy of Heart of the Gospel today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
If you're not a Bible scholar, the full message of how the Sunday Mass readings fit together can be tough to comprehend. Apologist Carlo Broussard is here to help. Join Carlo every Friday for the Sunday Catholic Word podcast. In each episode, he unpacks the scripture readings for that Sunday and brings them all together so you can better understand and defend the faith. Visit SundayCatholicWord.com to subscribe. That's SundayCatholicWord.com.
Want to know more about the origins of the Catholic Church? Joe Heschmeyer explores the beginnings of Christianity. In the early church was the Catholic Church. Joe digs deep into the words and actions of those who lived right after the apostles to refute anti-Catholic claims of how the faith was lived back then. Order your copy of The Early Church Was the Catholic Church today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. So happy to get to talk with Dr. Francis Beckwith from Baylor University, who has done all kinds of thinking and writing and speaking about the very issues that we're talking, in addition to many other things, about the issues that we're talking about today, and as we're on the cusp of the 4th of July. Religious freedom, religious liberty, freedom of speech. These are all, the First Amendment kind of smushes a whole bunch of rights into one amendment, but they do kind of seem to have a relation to one another. They're not unrelated. If I don't have the right to free speech, for example, I really don't have religious freedom.
That's right. In fact, some of the most significant cases the Supreme Court has dealt with have been cases where the government has limited religious speech in a context where they wouldn't limit speech about other matters. It's sometimes called viewpoint discrimination. Mm-hmm. And the court has consistently said, look, as long as the state is not the actor, the private actor, the fact that it's religious speech should not be singled out for special burden. And so, yeah, there's a whole bunch of cases arising from the 1980s up into this present one in 303 Creative that we were talking about earlier. There are all these cases where, yes, a religious citizen or religious speech is involved, but ultimately it's decided because it's just speech.
888-318-7884, the number. I could easily monopolize the whole hour with our guest, Dr. Francis Beckwith, but I do want to go to callers. If you'd like to be one of those callers, just dial that number, 888-318-7884. We're talking about religious liberty. Let's go to Jim in Greenbelt, Maryland, watching on YouTube. Jim, we're glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for Dr. Beckwith.
Yeah, good afternoon, gentlemen. in protecting that right of to not have the state compel us to speak, then I guess the price for that we would be willing to accept is that the web designer whose religion tells him that interracial marriage is wrong wouldn't have to design a web page for an interracial couple, but that's an acceptable cost, would you say?
I think so. I mean, right now, that web designer could actually create a website in which he or she advocates against interracial marriage. That's perfectly consistent with with freedom of speech. I think that if now, of course, I think the market's going to take care of a person like that. They get a reputation for not hosting a site or designing it. Remember, it's not a question of a product that is just being taken off the shelf or is simply being downloaded. It's actual designing of a site, and that's where it differs. So we can turn that around, right? So I used earlier the example of a gay web designer who was let's say is approached by the Westboro Baptist Church, who is notorious for their use of anti-gay slurs and so forth, and he could, I think, easily under the free speech clause, decline to create that site. Why? Because it is speech. And Westboro Baptist is just as much a protected class as a gay couple that may want to hire 303 Creative. Religion is just as much a protected class, sexual orientation. So, yeah, I mean, one of the prices that we pay in a free society, especially with freedom of speech, is that we have to tolerate speech that we think is immoral. We obviously tolerate speech that we think is correct, right? We just don't tolerate it, we embrace it. But that's just the price. Now, it would be different if, let's say a web designer who was a racist said, I'm not going to serve black people. That would be completely different, because there it would be the individual's status rather than anything they wanted to communicate on the site. That's the difference. One is status, the other is speech, and that's the distinction that Justice Gorsuch makes in the 303 Creative majority opinion.
Jim, I wonder what you think about that.
That's good. And then for a scenario like a company that says we won't sell homeowners insurance to interracial couples, that wouldn't fall under this, because that's more
it's not
a matter
expression.
of commerce. That's a matter of expression. Okay.
Yeah. And I want to just clarify something. This doesn't mean there aren't difficult cases or borderline cases, right? So there could be a case, scenario I actually have thought up, because my wife is a stained glass artist. Supposing she makes like 20 stained glass panels of the Virgin Mary, and so she sells them off the shelf, and then someone comes in to her shop from the First Church of Satan and says, I want to buy one to put behind the altar at my, satanic temple. And, so that's, there's intuitions I have that would be that my wife would have a right to decline service, and those kind of off the shelf. So I think there are, as a legal scholar, I mean, I have to, be forthright. There are going to be just some cases that are going to be difficult, but I don't think 303 Creative was a difficult one.
Jim, thank you very, very much for the call. The number is 888-318-7884. Our guest is Dr. Francis Beckwith. We're talking about religious liberty. There are people today who are baffled by the idea of religious liberty, because they don't, as you were talking about before, they don't understand why religion should have any place in society that's different from, say, the grocery store or the post office.
Yeah, it's actually in the literature, the academic literature over the past 15 or 20 years, there's arisen this view that actually questions why we should treat religion as special. And I think one of the reasons why that's arisen is because of the rise of the nones, that is NONES, people that are unaffiliated. They may believe in God, but they really don't have any deep religious commitments. It's actually forced a lot of us to have to think about what is it makes religion special. And I think ultimately, if we look at within the Catholic tradition, so one of the great declarations of the Catholic Church was issued at the Second Vatican Council called Dignitatis Humanae. And in it, the emphasis on what is it about religion? Why should we have religion? It's because human beings are ordered towards the transcendent. That is, we have a desire to situate ourselves and to have right relation with that which is greater than us. And I actually think you see this to a certain extent in secular movements in which people seem so committed that it's analogous to religion. So you often hear this, from folks, historians sometimes say this, that the early Bolsheviks were committed to Marxism as if it were a religion, right? They're willing to die for it. So I think what religion is ultimately, we see this not only in Christianity, but all the major religions. There's a understanding of having a right relation to that which is transcendent, that which is the source of all being. And that's what the American founders believed. If you go to some of the early documents by folks like Jefferson and Madison, they often talk about religion having to do duty to God. And so one of the reasons why we have not only a First Amendment, but in all the states, provisions for religious liberty is because everyone at the time believed that clearly there were religious differences. People had belonged to different denominations. There were individuals in the early states that were not even Christian, but there was an understanding that every human being had a duty to God, and that it's not the role of the government to make judgments as to which way is the right way. So, but if in fact you don't, let's say, grow up with that, let's say connected to some religious group, or do not grow up in a religious home, or you're just unacquainted with religion, you're right, it's going to seem mysterious as to why anyone would, why should we single out religion for special protection? And I think we've seen actually issues like in marriage. So even though, we've had the revolution of same-sex marriage itself has diminished in significance, right? So it used to be illegal to commit adultery. There are, I think, still on the books laws, tort laws for alienation of affection. You could, let's say your spouse cheats on you, you can sue the person who they cheated with for damages. That was part of basically it was like marriage is so serious, marriage is so important and children and the upbringing of children in a safe home in which the parents stay married is so important. Our laws are going to make it really difficult to break it. And then what happens is the 60s occur, 70s, and into the 80s, and we get no-fault divorce and the proliferation of the sexual revolution. And so people start asking questions like, well, why should it matter whether a child is born within marriage or not?
Yeah. And now look what we've got. Now most children are.
So that's right. So what happens? So there's like, once you start, it's like an ad. Like once you start thinking, once you start raising questions about why should we single out certain institutions or ways of life as more important than others because it seems unfair or against equality. And initially, I think people's reactions or belief on this are motivated maybe from a quasi good place. They don't want people to feel marginalized and so forth, but they don't understand why the institutions are the way they are. They're ultimately the way they are for our own good. because go ahead.
I just want to ask you about the other side of it, though, because more and more I hear from Catholics, including young Catholics, not old fogies, which I use that term advisedly, but from young fogies who say, Dr. Beckwith, why are you even talking about religious freedom or religious liberty? These aren't Catholic words. These are not words. This is not a way of speaking that comes from Catholic theology. You're using Enlightenment terminology.
Yeah. Well, that question's been, I've heard that question many times at least over the past 5 or 6 years. You have a younger generation of Catholics, most of whom were born in late 80s to early 90s, who are sort of coming of age now. They're starting families, and they have lived under the ravages of a kind of hyper-liberalism. Many of them have seen the devastation of the sexual revolution, and they say, if this is liberalism, I don't want any part of it.
Yeah.
I want to live in a society that protects these goods. But here's the thing, is that we have legislation in the United States long before the 1960s. It's been around since, at least in the U.S., since the end of the 18th century. And America was a pretty traditional country up until the late 1960s. And so a lot of the laws and let's say customs that these young people wish we had were part of the infrastructure of a nation that had robust religious liberty, and at the same time stood up for those goods of life and marriage and family. And it was reflected in our law. So I understand where these young people are coming from, and I hear some of their misgivings about contemporary liberalism, but I don't think you can put it at the feet of religious liberty. In fact, I mentioned earlier Dignitatis Humanae. In that document, which some of these young people criticize, one of the things that the fathers say is that religious liberty is not absolute, and that governments can cabin religious liberty based on goods of the natural law. So what we see today in terms of this kind of libertinism is not necessarily, you don't need it in order to have religious liberty.
888-318-7884 on this 4th of July weekend, talking about religious liberty with Dr. Francis Beckwith, who has thought more deeply and consistently about this than most of us have. And if you've got a question for him, we'd love to have your call. 888-318-7884.
It's all about the truth. Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
EWTN's Religious Catalog has great summer reading for kids. In God's Glorious Girl, young girls will hear the truth about who God created them to be from the very beginning of their lives. This book will help build a foundation of faith and confidence in God for each girl who hears these words. For more, visit EWTNRC.com today.
The Catechism defines evangelization as the proclamation of Christ and His gospel by word and the testimony of life. But what does that look like in real life? It looks like St. Paul Street Evangelists out in the public square, sharing the good news. We're a Catholic nonprofit that starts conversations by handing out free sacramentals. Then we employ our method of listen, befriend, proclaim, and invite. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization. Visit streetevangelization.com to learn more.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Coming up in September, the last full weekend of September, we'll have our Catholic Answers Conference. Our guest is Dr. Francis Beckwith, who will be there, and you can come and visit with him and hear what he has to say. We're going to be talking about God, well, I guess part of the conversation we're having this hour is indicative of the fact that God is forgotten in many places, and how to wake up the world and remind the world and help the world to remember God. That's what we're going to talk about. You can join us. CatholicAnswersConference.com is where you can get all the information. CatholicAnswersConference.com. Now all the callers are coming. Caleb in Illinois, listening on 92.5 FM. Thank you for your call, Caleb. We're glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for Dr. Beckwith.
My question, Dr. Beckwith, is how do we prevent abuses of religious liberty? And what I mean by that is I'm thinking of a couple of examples. During COVID, we saw people claiming religious liberty as a reason not to be vaccinated. But we also see it now with abortion, where people who are claiming, whether they are or not actually, to be Satanists, and then they have the right to abort based on that. And those, I'm sure there are others. Those are just a couple examples. But how do we help to prevent abuses or frauds of religious liberty, if you will?
Caleb, great question. Thank you.
Yeah. So religious liberty, as I mentioned earlier when I was talking about Dignitatis Humanae, but the same thing is true of American law. Religious liberty is not absolute. The government can pass laws that advance what it believes is good. So, for example, our laws forbid, let's say, a parent from tossing their child into a volcano because they want to worship Baal, right? Or things like that. How do we prevent, like you used the specific examples. So with the example of the vaccination, I mean, there it's going to be really a matter of the facts on the ground. So most governments and most institutions allow people to be exempted for conscientious objection for vaccinations. And I'm not sure, it's going to depend on the level of, if it's a pandemic, level of the harm. If a sufficient amount of people are not vaccinated, it's going to matter in terms of the risk that people may take if they in fact accept the vaccination. So one of the things that if you ever read or get involved in American jurisprudence concerning religion is that there is no like one size fits all for cases like this. So typically what a court will do, the Supreme Court will do, if the government, let's say, were to require that all citizens be vaccinated without mentioning religion, supposing, and it turns out there are some citizens that have religious objections to vaccination, the court will then ask the government if it's, let's say, a federal law. There's actually different ways of evaluating a law, whether it's federal or state. But if it's the federal law, what will kick in is something called the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. And the government would have to prove that it has a compelling interest in requiring every single person to be vaccinated. And that's a pretty high burden. So they're just going to depend on the facts on the ground. It's going to depend on whether it's a state or a federal law. Now, in terms of the other example you used about the use of religious freedom to justify abortion rights, that is going to be, I think that's the next horizon in religious liberty in terms of the pro-abortion side is going to start, it's already started using that argument here. States that craft laws that limit abortion have to be really careful that they explain why they're prohibiting abortion and why they're allowing certain exceptions, because what will happen is a court will say, if you give an exception that, let's say, for life of the mother, why can't you give an exception for religion? And of course, the state have a pretty easy case to say, well, we have a compelling interest for life of the mother. More difficult is going to be severe disability. Supposing a state says abortion is banned except for severe disability or life of the mother. It's going to be difficult for the state to make the argument that that they can't, that they won't be able to give the religious exemption. So states have to be really careful. But the other angle, then there's the other angle is how sincere is this religious claim? So if in fact there's evidence that the Church of Satan have just concocted this theology to challenge the law, then courts could throw it out as being insincere. It's going to depend. If the state argues that we are affirming the right to life for unborn human beings based on the fact that unborn human beings are persons, then it's going to be more difficult for a religious claim to a right to abortion, because the same person could claim, well, religion says that it's okay to kill my 5-year-old, right? So I have to get an exemption for homicide laws. That no court is going to accept that. So it's going to get pretty complicated over the next 5 or 6 years in terms of the courts, and we'll be arguing out abortion, I think, for some time to come.
And it's harder to arrive at or to settle these very difficult cases when there's not goodwill on either side. I mean, there's just bad will all around, or I don't know if bad will is there, but certainly a bad mood all around. It's very hard to settle an argument when everyone's in a bad mood.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Caleb, does that satisfy what you were looking for?
Yeah, that was a phenomenal answer. Thank you very much.
That's what you get with Dr. Francis Beckwith. We're not playing around here. It's fantastic answers or no answers at all. Walt in Pennsylvania, if you got to be quick if you'd like an answer from Dr. Beckwith, because we are getting near the end. Go ahead, Walt.
Yep. Block abortion mill doors, and when we were being taken away, from the other side used to shout out, "Here are the Christians, where are the lions?" They still have that attitude. When are we going to understand that they really want to put us in jail or kill us, and we need to fight back hard?
Dr. Beckwith?
Yeah, well, I don't think everyone who thinks we're wrong wants to put us in jail and throw away the key or yeah, there are people out there who really despise the Catholic Church and its doctrines and its beliefs. But there are other people that just simply disagree with us who I think we can dialogue with. So it's a complicated world out there, and not everybody who thinks we're wrong thinks we're evil.
But there is the stakes are very high for everyone. I mean, one of the things we talked about earlier is that since the Obergefell decision, which I have to say, I think a lot of Christians resent that we were told, this has nothing to do with you. It's other people getting married. It's not going to have any effect in your life. And we said, of course it's going to have effect on our schools, on our free speech and all that. And they said, no, it's not. And now it is. Yeah. I think there's a huge resentment about that. But getting past the resentment, we do. Yeah. I mean, there are basic issues of what can you say, what can you not say, what's protected and what's not protected that now have to be worked out in the light of this revolution.
That's right. And I think it was disingenuous when people gave us that answer. I think some of them sincerely believed it, but I think there were others that realized that law has a particular logic to it. You can't change one part of the law without it affecting other aspects of the law, especially a thing as marriage. If you think of the law as a kind of organism, and if you, let's say, plant a virus in the organism, it's going to affect the whole organism. And so once you change marriage, then things like presumption of paternity, that is that the assumption that any child that arrives as a result of a union is part of that union. Well, if you have a same-sex couple, what's presumption of paternity?
Right. Yeah.
So there's all sorts of things like that I don't know if anyone thought about, like that just runs right through the law.
I'll tell you what this hour has done. I'm more excited than ever about the Catholic Answers Conference. Really looking forward to meeting you there and hearing what you have to say. And I'm very grateful that you did this hour on 4th of July weekend where we could reflect a little bit on where we are with religious liberty.
Thank you for having me. Look forward to going to San Diego.
Dr. Francis Beckwith has been our guest. I'll say it again, CatholicAnswersConference.com if you want to come to the conference. Hey, tomorrow we got a great show for you. Don't miss it. Don't get so caught up with hot dogs that you miss us. See you then, God willing. Catholic Answers Live.